Today on Punk Rock Theologian, we're continuing the humanity of Christmas, and we're going to look at Joseph and Mary's trip to Bethlehem. That this comes at the whim of a far-off emperor. They have to go about 90 miles, and the problem I have with it is that we have almost a universal mental image, at least in my culture. It's on all of our Christmas cards and pageants and stuff of what this was like, and so little of it's actually in Scripture. So I'm going to look at when they go, how they go, and where they go, and try to go through this quickly because I could spend an hour on this topic. But when we get the word in Matthew, it tells us that Joseph has to go to Bethlehem, his ancestral home. That matters later. And he takes with him his wife Mary, who is pregnant. That word that's translated pregnant, it means swollen with child. All that frankly means is that she's showing. Like, this could be anywhere second trimester or later. Luke actually kind of lends some weight to that argument, because chapter 1 ends with the birth of John the Baptist, when we know Mary is 3 months pregnant then. But then chapter 2 starts with, at that time, the Roman emperor ordered a census. Keep in mind, Luke didn't write it with chapters. To him, it's one big letter. So he tells us about something that happened when Mary's 3 months pregnant, and his very next sentence is, at that time, the census. Now, this census is a thing. The word about it takes a while to get out. We picture things as almost instantaneous because in our culture a lot of stuff just about is. But they didn't have TV and internet, so it takes a while for the word of the census to get out there. It's going to take a while for people to make the trips to their ancestral homes. It's going to take a while for the census to happen, so you're going to be there for a while. This isn't like a day trip. And so you got to slow these things down for it to make sense. So this trip could have happened anywhere, second half of pregnancy. But then how do they get there? Once again, our imagery all shows Joseph walking along leading a donkey that Mary's riding on. Very unlikely. Donkeys, when they do, for starters, there's no donkey in this story in the Bible. When donkeys do show up in the Bible, it's either the rich and elite people that ride around on one as a status symbol showing that they don't have to walk like the common folk, or a donkey is like an upper middle class kind of thing, but they're pack animals. Like, if Joseph and Mary had one, it would have been carrying the luggage and they'd be on foot. Because remember, this is a long trip. But we know from later in the story and the sacrifice they bring to the temple that they're actually quite poor. So it's very, very unlikely they had a donkey. Most likely they're on foot and carrying everything they have. This trip stinks. So then where do they go? This is the big deal, because we have the line that says, there was no room for them in the inn. And based on that one line, we have all these stories of they're going door to door looking for a place, and finally there's the innkeeper that maybe he's mean and he's like, no, there's no room. Or maybe he's nice and he says, oh, sorry, all the rooms are filled, but you can stay in the stable out back. However you want to slice it, it's irrelevant because there's no innkeeper. There's no innkeeper in the scripture, but also the word inn that's in Luke 2 is not the same word for an inn that's in Luke 10. When that's the Good Samaritan brings the injured guy to an inn, and that one actually has an innkeeper, that's a commercial inn. The one in Luke 2, that word inn is actually like guest room or upper room. And so there was no room for them in the guest room. Think of it this time of year, people traveling for the holidays and going home to grandma's house sort of a deal. Because that's basically what Joseph's doing. This is his ancestral home. It's where his family came from. And so they get there, and there's no guest room for them. Maybe the other cousins got there first, or maybe they got there, but the family doesn't buy Mary's story about the angel. Yeah, I'm sure that's why you're pregnant. I'll bet you're still a virgin. And so they're not really welcome in the guest room. But family and hospitality are a huge deal in this culture, so they're not kicked out in the street either. And they're allowed to stay in the stable, which is to us kind of like an attached garage. That there was a place where you kept the animals close and connected to the house. It keeps the animals safe and accessible, and sometimes it helps their body heat warm the house and things like that. But this is where they end up. And I'm sorry to jack up your whole nativity scene or something, but the point of this is, it's not for me to come along and say, no, listen to me, I can tell you what it's really like. The point is, be careful telling yourself a story that's not in the Bible. Scripture gives us so little information of the details on this, and that's because it wasn't important. What's important is that the prophecy about the Messiah being born in Bethlehem is fulfilled, and that God takes care of them through it all. And we turn it into this story that, we don't travel 90 miles on a donkey and have to stay out behind the inn in the barn. But we do experience that something comes up that jacks up our plans and makes things a lot more difficult than they should have been. And we have to go through uncomfortable stuff. And then maybe you encounter some family tension and things are uncomfortable and weird. And so you have to go through things not the way you would have wanted to. That we can relate to. And so let the Bible speak for itself and say what it really says. And don't try to fill in the blanks and make it say what it doesn't say.